With Coco, Black Panther, and now Crazy Rich Asians, Hollywood as of late has been doing such a stupendous job in bringing diversity to the silver screen. Great on you, Hollywood. Great on you. What is up, everybody? RandomRandomMan here, bringing you my review for Crazy Rich Asians. Based on the best-selling novel of the same name, written by Kevin Kwan, the plot basically follows a young Asian American woman, played by Constance Wu, who travels with her boyfriend, played by Henry Golding, to visit his family, only to soon realize that her boyfriend's family is among the richest in Singapore. Going into this movie, I had moderate expectations. They weren't very high at first, simply because the marketing of this film didn't grasp me entirely to give this movie a watch. Little did I know at the time of first seeing the trailer for this film that this movie is a pretty big deal to the demographic it is aimed towards. This is the first Hollywood film made by a major studio in 25 years to have an all-Asian cast, which struck me as surprising because it took this long for another film featuring an ensemble Asian cast to get made and released by Hollywood. Crazy Rich Asians specifically is a rom-com, which I'll admit I'm a big sucker for those kinds of films. Hell, one of my favorite movies of all time is the classic rom-com Breakfast at Tiffany's, starring my fave Audrey Hepburn. This movie actually has a connection in a not so positive way to representing the Asian community, as Holly Golightly's landlord, Mr. Yuniyoshi, is played by Mickey Rooney in yellowface, sporting an exaggerated accent. Yeah, if there's one thing I do not like about this film, despite me loving it so much, it's that aspect. It was racist back then in 1961, it's racist now, and it's just all around distracting. So Crazy Rich Asians having this big amount of appeal to the Asian community, the positive reviews this movie got, and it opening at #1 at the US domestic box office this past weekend, convinced me to see what all the buzz was about in the first place. Starting out with the cast and their performances, like I said, this is the first Hollywood film in a long while to feature an all-Asian ensemble cast. And with our two leads here, Constance Wu as Rachel and Henry Golding as Nick, these two have such superb charisma and chemistry with one another. Constance Wu's Rachel is specifically an economics professor at NYU, and the way that she composes herself as a character, she is very likable, in contrast to how Nick, of course, he is very wealthy. And while Rachel is not in any way poor, but definitely not as comfortably privileged as Nick and his family are. And the way Nick is portrayed by Golding, he never comes off as a stuck-up douchebag or just someone who is just rich and loves to live in excess. No, his character wanted to get away from his family and then fell in love and got together with Rachel. And you see just how humble these two are. There are a few members of this great looking cast that I want to give shout outs to as well, such as Gemma Chan, who plays Nick's cousin. She has a side plot of her own. I thought she was very nice here. Awkwafina plays the college best friend to Rachel, who just so happens to live in Singapore, and I thought she was underutilized in Ocean's 8 earlier this summer, but given the material here in Crazy Rich Asians, pitch perfect with her comedic chops and all-around likability here. There's also Ken Jeong, who plays the father to Awkwafina's character. His role is too small to be considered even a minor supporting role, more like an extended cameo, but like Awkwafina, I thought he was very funny. Big mention has to be given to Michelle Yeoh as the domineering mother of Nick. She's a martial arts badass. She needs no introduction, but in this movie, playing a more subdued and dramatic role, she is terrific. It is pretty clear from the first scene between her, Rachel, and Nick that she is not so approving of Nick dating a Chinese-American woman like Rachel, but we do get to understand why she is that way from her point of view, and her all around just being overly protective of her son, Nick. There's also Nico Santos, who I have to give a shout out to simply because he has had a luminous screen presence. There's also just the rest of the ensemble cast here. Whether they have big or small bit parts, they added to the all-around atmosphere that this movie created, with it being so culturally significant to have an all-Asian cast like this one. So all in all, the cast here, specifically the performances from Woo, Golding, and Yeoh, are outstanding. The writing in this film sets itself up in a pretty standard form to what other romantic comedies in the past have structured themselves as. I've never read the book that this movie is based on, but judging from the opening scene of this movie, it's pretty clear that the movie was trying to make itself have a certain style and tone to where it is lighthearted, but also have some serious undertones in between all of that. The opening scene of this film has Michelle Yeoh's character and Golding's character Nick, when he was much younger, them showing up to a hotel, and it's the kind of scene that has been done in movies before, to where minorities are looked down upon, but then it turns out, oh, they're bigger than they actually seem to be from the white people in the scene. So yeah, then the movie cuts to many years later with Nick and Rachel dating. It is stated that they've been together for about a year, and then Rachel is invited by Nick to come back with him to his home in Singapore for a high-profile wedding. Nick is the best man to the groom, and oh my god, I'm gonna get this part out of the way right now. The production design of this movie, so gorgeous. It looks so immaculately put together that it's such a visual treat to be able to see this on the big screen. Fun fact, or not so fun fact, this movie was actually supposed to be at one point streaming on Netflix, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Why wouldn't you want to see a bunch of the visuals that this movie shows on the biggest screen possible? All $30 million that were spent on this movie's budget were certainly put to amazing use. Just the locations that this movie takes us to, whether it's on a beach, it's inside of this lavish palace/manor. Oh my god, I really want to go to Singapore after seeing this film. And even the costumes too, just the way everyone is all dressed up. I mean, this movie is set in the backdrop of a high-profile wedding, as I've said. And when we get to the actual wedding itself, it's one of the best weddings I've ever seen put in any movie, period. The cinematography certainly aided in helping the movie's visuals pop on screen. Same with the directing by John M. Chu. Now, this is a guy who hasn't had the best of track records with movies. His previous films have included the likes of the Justin Bieber documentary Never Say Never and the Gem and the Holograms film from 2015. I've only seen parts of those movies and they weren't very engaging from what I saw. But here, what Chu brings directing-wise is a lot of focus in showing us a lot of the sweeping visuals, but also some tenderness to a bunch of the scenes, specifically between Woo and Golding's characters. Same thing with the movie's editing. The editing stood out a lot for this film in showing off a lot of its style and charm, but also being consistently entertaining for the most part. I would even go as far as to say this is one of the best edited movies I've seen all year. The movie runs at about 120 minutes/2 hours, and like I said, I was mostly entertained with seeing all of the beautiful excess that this movie has to offer on top of the attractive leads that we have here. And this movie, even though I was mostly charmed by it, from time to time it did fall into some of the rom-com cliches we've seen in a ton of movies before this one. There is the typical disapproving parent kind of thing that we've seen before. There's even a liar revealed kind of subplot that rears itself towards the end. That ultimately led this movie to be pretty predictable, easily the biggest issue I had with it. But what got me to forget about that for the most part was the charm of our two leads, the humor when it's there, the big heart that this movie had by the end, and just seeing the culture represented. I found myself so in tune with the Asian culture shown on screen and wanting to be taken away by the beauty of it all. This is why I really enjoyed Crazy Rich Asians. Delivering on diversity, this movie proves that both inclusion and cultural representation matter for the future of film. In my intro of this video, I mentioned a couple titles that really did a lot for representing their demographics and cultures that are spotlighted throughout their films. Disney Pixar's Coco from last year did a lot in representing my heritage. I am of Mexican descent, and what this movie did was so respectful and beautiful and also quite unique in an animated film. Black Panther from earlier this year did a lot as well in having people who are normally not into superhero movies come out and see their African culture be depicted on the big screen with a high-profile movie like that one. And likewise, Crazy Rich Asians is certainly going to do a lot in making the Asian community feel so included in a big Hollywood film like this one. For those of you who are into rom-coms, this fits the bill for what you would expect in a movie from that genre. Even if you're not big into rom-coms, I think there's something in this film for everybody, no matter where you come from or what background you have. I certainly think the visuals of this movie make it worth watching on the big screen alone. I definitely recommend it. My final verdict for Crazy Rich Asians is 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Crazy Rich Asians. Social media links in the description. Subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.